What I want to do today is today and next time actually is to give a lecture that I wanted to give you last semester but never had time for, called Playing with Politics, which is a giant 47 slide lecture that I will teach over 2 classes, in which I will talk about 9 theses about politics. These are basically 9 rants. They could each be an essay, in some cases they are, um, about political theory, essentially. But before we dive into that, um, I want to introduce it a little bit. So let's do that. By the way, please ask these people where they are. Communicate to them my frustrations. So what I want to talk about today is, or what I want to introduce this with, is talking about how your generation, Gen Z, and mine, millennials, can think about politics, and how our way of dealing with politics is actually quite different from the ones before that. So we inherit all this political theory from previous generations, but we don't live in the same political culture anymore. And that's quite a bit of a problem, actually, when you think about what should I do with my political convictions, or figuring out what my political convictions are. The culture is quite different, and I want to start by talking about that. It's kind of half our introduction thing. So if we look at discourse in the previous one, right? You saw there's some kind of dialectic of ideas, right? One idea flows into the next one. Liberalism starts, it triggers conservatism with the French Revolution, then it triggers communism, then later to it reacts fascism, and then they start reacting to each other, right? One idea leads to the next, and even in the present, that dialectic hasn't been resolved. There's still a lot of tensions. We have our own problems. We have a lot of contradictions. If you just look at today's politics in Leon, it's one giant mess, right? So we haven't really resolved things. What we can say in the long term is that there's been a broadening of political issues. So more things are political today than they were in the past, and that process keeps happening, right? And we keep getting more ideas, and in some sense better ideas than before. But despite this, despite that, bigger understanding of politics, the fundamental questions are still open. Fundamental questions as in who belongs to the political community, who should have the power. Looks like democracy resolved that. It's not really true, because we still disagree a lot about what power exactly people have, and how much. And questions like how do we divide the economy? These type of fundamental questions are still essentially contested today. Plus, on top of that, we have all kind of new challenges. We have new ways of thinking, new things that we pay attention to. Gender is one of them, but also climate change, are other things, technological evolutions, that questions our established way of thinking, right? We have come a certain way with history of ideas, but it's not over yet, because there's again new things we need to deal with. And there's the question remains, the question that Lenin asked in his book, what is to be done? Right? Lenin once wrote a book, What's to be Done, that is about Russia. I think he copied that title from someone else too that wrote before him. But the point is, it's a good question. What is to be done? What should we do in politics, right? And, well, you're a very small audience, so I could directly ask you if you know. Right? Do you have a very clear answer of what is to be done in the world, or not?
Um, I don't know. Was that like personally, I could have some ideas,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if they are the ones that we need.
Okay, okay.
At least I don't want to be like too much, like, mm, to take the risk of telling that I have the solution.
Oh, but you don't have to tell me the solution, just if you think you do. Um, well, in any case, some people might, other people are still a bit confused, right? You may be a bit less because you study political science. But in most cases, students are still kind of searching for answers and what you should be doing. And they like things from different ideologies. And they don't like things from different ideologies. And they're not fully in one camp. And that idea of not being fully convinced of anything is very typical for your generation and is very typical for the culture that you grew up in and the way of culture on like a very meta level and the way of thinking that we have today, which is what we could describe as postmodern. Now, postmodern is a big word that I don't like using. I think postmodern is one of the worst words in social science. It's an extremely vague concept. But I have to take it there. It's that serious. I have to use these vague words. Um, but what is postmodernity? Well, I'm not going to explain you. What I will do is show you a difference with modernity so you kind of start to understand. Welcome, Mariana, by the way. I'm happy you finally found
Good
us.
morning. Yes.
It was hard, this join button. You were like, is it on the left corner, on the bottom corner? Where is it? But you found it. Now, Miss Mariana, Miss Sophia, this is what modernity looks like. I'm talking about the difference between modernity and postmodernity in some kind of very vague lecture of mine that will take 2 classes, right? I gave a brilliant explanation of anarchism. You just missed it. No. This is modernity. Does anybody have an idea of what this is? This picture. It's a
No,
real picture. It's
yeah, I
not
think
just.
I
Looks like a rocket, but
Uh,
probably not.
a subway.
it's a zeppelin. It's an unfinished zeppelin. It's an unfinished airship. Now, why do I say this is what modernity looks like? Everything about this picture is modern. Let's first think about the zeppelin, right? A zeppelin is a flying ship, literally. That's quite crazy, right? And it's also very. Oh, we lost people. It's also very big. Zeppelins are bigger than any modern aircraft. What you see in this picture is just the tip of the Zeppelin. This is like 20% of it. Um, so these things are truly enormous, and that's already very modern to try to go for big ideas. We don't do this anymore. We don't build things this big anymore. To go for risky, big ideas. Because it is to do grand things, right? To reach for the moon, literally. They reach for the moon. Haven't been back since. Um, and to take risks, like this whole ship can be brought down by a single shot. If one shell hits this, it explodes. So that's why we don't have them anymore. But that shows you something of the mindset, right? The willingness to take risks. Also, as you can see, this thing is perfectly symmetrical. And it has to be. If one thing is out of place, this thing will collapse. So everybody needs to work in a similar way with the singularity of mind, right? It all needs to come together. And that again is very modern, to have one style, one direction, one coordinated way of doing things. And just the sheer scale of it, right? And what they're trying to do here. And it's man-made. That's also a very modern thing. As you can see, the little people on it making it. So the time in which they would build these type of airships and do these type of grand, risky, kind of streamlined and single-minded things, that is modernity. When man was doing big, arrogant things. We don't live in those times. We live in postmodern times. Now, what's the difference? Modernity and postmodernity are essentially about attitude. They're very vague cultural words, but you can describe the difference between them. A modern attitude, first of all, is consistent. People will have one plan. You pick one ideology, and whatever you do is going to be consistent with that. It includes how you live, your conviction on the family, your religion, like everything is going to be in line with each other. People were a lot more consistent in the 50s or the 60s with their beliefs. Well, today, there's a lot of inconsistency, right? You are for the environment, but you also want to travel. You like socialism, but you don't want to vote Morena. People are constantly paranoid, yet they use smartphones that spy on them. There's a lot of inconsistency in postmodern thinking, in today's thinking. People do not care too much about being consistent, let's say, with themselves. People claim to be atheists, but they believe in karma, etc., right? There's no real style to this. Similarly, modern attitude is universal. That means that what you believe for yourself, you think everybody should believe it. You think there's one truth, and you try to get it. Well, in postmodern attitude, that idea is rejected, and we are in times of relativism. Everything's a construct. Everything is just the way you see it, right? That might be true for you, but it's not true for me. These type of things. Nobody would say that 60 years ago. It was like, no, you're wrong, right? Today we have much more relativist approach to things. Just like in modern attitude, you would have one style. Things would be very stylized. If you ever look at old pictures from the 50s and 60s, like things wouldn't be random in the background. Things would be very stylized. Today they're mixed, right? That's about people's music taste or art or whatever. There's a lot more combination going on of things. Modernity was about doing big things, like going to the moon, building airships, right? Giant things that humanity was trying to do. Today, not so much. Today, people are doing many small things, especially politically. The attention has really fractured. In modern times, people strove very directly for power. In your times, most people are suspicious of power, right? Being in politics is not very sexy today. Maybe to you because you study political science, but in general, people are suspicious of people with power, right? And you kind of automatically turn against whoever has the power as a generation. Modernity was radical, today is cautious. The main politics of modernity were distributional politics, national distributional politics, not too much international thinking. Today, main politics of the day are identity politics. Not only identity politics, right? You also have things like ecology that concern your generation, but we'll get to that later. Big difference, modern attitude is judgmental. Today, if one thing typifies modern generations, is that they're a bit more open-minded than the ones before them, right? But again, with that comes less consistency. Good judgment comes partly from consistency. Modernity is serious, postmodernity is frivolous, and the focus in modernity is social progress, while in postmodernity, it's realizing yourself. Now, I assume you identify or that you identify the attitude of the people around you more with the pink column than the blue one, right? If that's not true, well, then you're an old soul. I myself also belong to millennials, which would be more in the pink part too. However, as you know, I'm an 80-year-old man trapped in the body of a 32-year-old. So I strongly identify with the blue column in my own way of thinking. Now, why do I tell you all of this, right? Because it matters where we stand today in terms of not ideology, but just our overall way of interpreting ideology, right? Because we are going to need to craft a new political project, right, for the 21st century, building on these modern ideas, but in a postmodern era. So how can we, by using this kind of open-mindedness, by using this willingness to mix, how can we take the thoughts from the past and create something new out of it that fits our era? That's kind of the question, right? That is your kind of overall mission as politics students, to produce a new politics. And I want to talk about that on where I would take things, or where I think we should take things. Now, there is no neutral answer to this question, right? I cannot just, well, a neutral answer would be that you would always end in the center, and that's not very interesting. So we have to select, have to, like with everything, have to choose examples, have to choose what I'm talking about, have to choose the order of things. So we have to choose, and therefore the only thing I can really give you is my own view on things. We've talked a lot about other people's views and theories in the past year. But today and next time, I'm going to talk a bit about my own political thoughts. Now, this is going to be a lot broader than you think it is. This is not some lecture on socialism at all. This is my ideas on how I would want you to think about politics. Not what politics to think about, but how how to figure out what you really want in politics, basically. So this lecture is going to be 9 theses, 9 points I want to make, 9 arguments about politics in general, in the most general sense, without diving into any ideology. And since I'm not diving into anything, this won't be a very exact plan. I one day plan to write a plan. One day plan to write a book called Radical Humanism, which I will explain what I think we should do. But that's not today. Today it's more that I'm going to give you general directions, as in that way, but not how far, right? And since I'm going to give you general directions, although I'm going to give you general directions, I don't expect you to follow this. I'll probably lose you on the road. You probably be like, I don't like this, sounds like some nonsense. And that's okay, right? At the end, what I want to do is to make you think. Okay, Ms. Mariana, Ms. Sophia, welcome. Are you here? Do you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. How are you, doctor?
Okay. I was very lonely without my students initially, but now I'm okay. So do you understand what's going on? I'm giving some kind of general lecture about politics.
Yeah, I kind of think that I'm okay. We're talking about, well, I think that the good thing is about to start now with the challenge and your 9 proposals.
I hope it will be good, yes. So, the first thing is something I'm going to go over a bit quicker, because you're already convinced that politics matters, or you're going to have an existential crisis about your career choice. But I want to drive the point home a little bit, or to at least reinforce that. First thing, I want you to keep taking, let's say, these things very serious. Because we have to go back to what politics is, right? Politics is the sphere of society that decides the relations of all other spheres. What that means is that politics are decisions about everything that's important enough to the group. In other words, politics are by definition about all important things. Or at least all important things normally get politicized. So that means that if you're not interested in politics, you're not interested in important things in society. Whenever somebody tells me that they have no interest in politics, I imagine them watching anime all day and sleeping with like this giant pillow with the like waifu print thing. Like that's what I imagine people do when they say they're not interested in politics, because it means they're not interested in society at all. And I don't know what you do if you're not. I guess you watch anime. So nothing wrong with anime, right? Just imagining people. So if you're not interested in society, if you're not interested in politics, you're not interested in society. If you're not interested in society, you're not really a serious person. That sounds very harsh to say, but it's kind of true. Why do you think it's true? Or at least you're not a serious adult. Because being interested in society, taking responsibility for your community, to me, is a rite of passage. It is what separates boys from girls. Boys from girls. Nope, that's not what it is. It separates boys from men and girls from women. All societies have rites of passages, whether it's to kill a wolf, or to walk through coals, or to get married, or to whatever it is, right? And in our societies, I think it is political participation. That's what turning 18 really does for you. So to be a serious person, to me, you should care. And if you care, you should have some minimal interest in politics. Now, you might say, well, teacher, that's way too intense for me, right? Why can't we just let it be, right? Why just let politics happen? Let it be, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. No, fuck John Lennon. I'm not with Lennon, not with Lennon, I'm with Lenin. And Lenin taught us that the active will inherit the earth, that the people who organize are going to win. And that's what we should do, right? These type of bourgeois songs are just there to keep you down and to keep you inactive. Because, as many wise men and women said before me, the opposite of love is indifference, not hate, right? If you don't care, if you just let it be, it's not a very, very loving attitude. So, if politics is important, what I want you to do is to keep spending your time trying to understand it. Mr. Martinez, I'm going to ask you a question. What is your most prized possession? It cannot be a person. Persons are not possessions. Like, what's the thing that you have or that you've gathered in your life that is kind of the most important thing or the most precious thing?
It's kind of cheesy, but it's an Spider-Man comic that my dad gave me when I turned 12. It's
Okay.
it's a comic that was released on the 90s, so it's like on a bag, and it has a lot of value to me.
Okay. Cool. I don't have any Spider-Man comics. My prized possession, which is even more cheesier, it's extremely cheesy, this answer. It's my worldview. They say, huh? Well, according to Marxist understanding of property, you get things by working on them. And I've spent so much time in my life crafting my own worldview, and I kind of perceive it as an object almost, as something that I didn't have and that I made. In the same way, if I would craft some kind of wooden statue, I spent countless hours trying to become more consistent in my mind, just ordering things, trying to balance ideas against each other, trying to absorb new information, place that, etc. I spent, I think, 2 hours a day at least, blowing through news and things like that. And if I would lose it, I would be very little without it. And I want you to get an interest in investing in your own worldview and seeing it as an investment, seeing it as something you build, like you would build a house, right? At the bottom of this worldview, there should be some standpoints. In your worldview, it's not just about accepting whatever other people say. Sometimes you need to take a stand on something. And the standpoint is literally a point you stand on, which means if you have no standpoints, you're not standing on anything. You're just audience to the theater, right? So as you go older, if you like something, right? Let's say I remember, for example, Sophia having interest in these cooperatives. Make that a standpoint, right? Try to defend it against people. See how that goes. As you get older, you want to try to also learn how to defend certain positions. It's very easy to always criticize. Now you're in the stage that you should criticize, right? But when you get closer to 30, it becomes time to try to grow your worldview, but try to defend things and try to incorporate critiques and things like that. And in order to know what's really going on, right, you will need a lot of knowledge for that. I think I've talked about this before, but from a sociology of knowledge point of view, if you look at all the information in your head, not information, all the knowledge, a lot of it has nothing to do with the factual world, right? There's going to be all kind of biographical information of fictional characters in your head, including or the planets of Star Wars and their fauna and flora, or there's going to be information about video games, or the narratives of telenovelas, or information about the exes of the friends of your ex, and things like that. That are not necessarily scientific knowledge, right? Most of our head is full of that type of stuff. Plus, you're constantly manipulated by fake news. So in order to develop standpoints, in order to develop your worldview, and therefore be productive in politics, I always invite you to try to read about history and to read about data, raw data, polls, statistics, things INEGI publishes, this type of stuff. This defends you against these type of things, against fake news and against confusion, against gossip. So that's my first point. I want you to develop your political worldview. Now, what then should that be about? Second thesis, second claim I'm going to make is that politics should primarily be about solving collective problems. Let's take a step back and look at the question, right? Politics is important, good, but what's politics about, right? What should politics really be about? What should we look for in politicians or in a political theory, right? What's kind of the thing that well, it should be about? It's a very fundamental political question, right? Your answer to this will push you in a direction away from certain ideologies and towards others. And there's many possible answers. You could have the idea that politics is about the realization of values. You could have the idea that politics is about safeguarding natural rights, for example. That's what John Locke says, right? You already have these rights, and now we just need politics to kind of implement them. You can also have a very positivist view of politics, where politics is just a translation of people's individual interests to a national level. So you don't ask people what they think, you ask them what they want. And if you just make a sum of what all people want for themselves, right, what's in their interest, you would get the answer to what politics should do. This is not how I see it, but that is a way you could see it, right? You could have a very monistic view of politics, like neoconservatives and Trotskyists have, where there's basically two forces in the world and they're in some kind of eternal struggle with each other, right? It's good versus evil. And politics is just one variant of this kind of cosmic battle between good and evil. You could see politics as a sort of dialogue between opinions, right? Politics is a mean to exchange ideas. If this is true, then there's not a lot of politics going on in northern Mexico, because we're definitely not doing that. But you could see it that way. right? You could see politics as a way to self-enrichment. This is a very Mexican cynical view towards it, right? Or a popularity contest. Who is the best influencer wife? Or you could see it as in a Platonic sense, as some space for creating utopias, right? For Plato, politics is about finding the perfect plan. And we could spend our time trying to draft the perfect plan in your, I don't know, your bachelor thesis, etc. You get more fascist idea that politics is about whatever the leader says, or other variants, right? Now, all of these could be good answers. They're not my answer. My answer, as the title says, is about solving collective problems. I believe that in the 21st century, the primary focus of politics should be in solving problems. I think that the answer to this question depends on what time you're in. I think politics are relative to their time. What my political opinion today was probably different from what it would have been if I lived 300 years ago or 600 years ago. And these answers, if we would live in a perfect world, for example, this idea of politics as an expression of values would be quite attractive to me. Except that is not our world today. We live in very different times. We live in gloomy times. We live in a damn pandemic, right? We live in end times where the world is falling apart, where you have growing inequality, where climate change is threatening to destroy the planet, where we have these new migration waves, where wars have yet again started last week, where robots threaten to take us over. Don't even get me started on that yet. And what they have in common, all these problems, is that they're collective action problems. They're things that I cannot solve. We might be able to solve them, but me alone and you alone cannot. So politics should be about dealing with that. Because these are the things that we in our individualized world cannot deal with. And these are things exactly that we need politics for, right? And so what I look for in a leader would be a woman that is able to identify what exactly are the problems and the causes of the problems in their societies, and who can identify a plan for coming up with that. Right? I don't at all care for anything else, basically. It could literally be a person in a Dr. Simi suit. If they can do this, I will support them, right? This is why I like people, we talked about leaders at the beginning. I like people like Fidel Castro, who in their time were able to see exactly and analyze in extreme detail. If you ever read Castro, he's very detailed in his analysis. He's very sociological. What exactly is wrong in their society, and who can come up with a plan, a realistic plan, of trying to change that and actually do it, right? This is the kind of things I am looking for in a leader, whoever she is. Now, that's one thing, right? Politics should be about problem solving. The other thing that I think in secondary level politics is about, politics is more than policy. This we sometimes get confused. Politics is more than coming up with a good idea. Politics is, at the end of the day, also a power struggle, right? The value of democracy is not just, or is not primarily that people come up with the best candidate or the best plan. It is about giving power to the people and giving power to certain people and certain groups, right? Different governments are not just different in policy, they're also different in which groups they represent and who their constituency is and what impact that has on power relations in society. So politics is also a way to change power relations between groups, regardless of solving problems or not, and to do so in a peaceful way. It's a way to change power between people, not as individuals but as groups, without fighting wars with each other. And I think politics is about these two things. I think it's about solving problems. I think it's about changing power relations. Now, what do you think about this? Would you agree with what I just said? Or do you prefer one of these other interpretations?
I agree in collective problems because, as you said, like we are in the middle of a lot of things like the pandemic, the climate change, um, fascism, racism. You know, like everything is just collapsing, and sometimes it's overwhelming. Um, but yeah, is the most important thing
Mhm.
to take care right now.
No, you have to be very careful. If you agree with me here, then we're kind of on a roller coaster. Because once you agree with this, a lot of other things are gonna follow from this. For example, if you agree with me, if you don't say no, I'm gonna assume you do. Haha. If you agree with this, then it means that one thing you will judge politics on is based on how well they are able to solve problems, right? My main criteria for comparing ideologies is their problem-solving capacity. And some ideologies have more problem-solving capacity than others. The ones that are very threatened. I think the ones that qualify would be conservatism, socialism, and communism. They have problem-solving capacity. The others are a bit more troubled. Anarchism, which I gave the best lecture on ever before you joined, Miss Marianne and Sophia. Anarchism it doesn't qualify here because it doesn't want to organize, which kind of by definition puts you out of the game of solving collective problems, which also explains why this never really happened. Neoliberalism is also quite challenged here, at least, to say the least. They would almost fully depend on technology solving their problems because neoliberalism does not want to intervene. It's one of the core ideas that the state shouldn't do things, which means that we cannot do anything when we're confronted with collective problems. We just have to sit back and hope for the best. Which you could want, it's just a bit harder to make compatible with what I just said. But the same also goes for the far right of nationalism, right? Because this is based on externalization, this is based on blaming others, this is based on making someone else suffer from your problems, which moves the problem around rather than solving it. So in this view of politics, it already shifts through them a little bit, right? So politics should primarily be about collective action problems. But then the question is, what problems, right? It's about problems, okay, what problems? I hope you can see my lecture zooms in, right? We start with politics important, then what politics, then what problems of politics, etc. We're going to keep zooming in. Well, here I want to talk about what I call escalating problems. So one of the main questions in politics, right, is which political problems should we address first? This is one of the main struggles in politics. That's the struggle for the agenda. What are we going to talk about first? Right? What's get voted on today? What do we politicize? What type of topics does the media cover? These are all very political questions. And in that, priority matters a lot. Because you cannot, as a government, you cannot do everything at the same time. You can intend to do everything at the same time, and you can do everything, but not at once, right? There's limited manpower, there's limited resources, there's limited time to think about things if you're a leader. So you need to have some kind of priority in things. And this becomes very tangible once you get to coalition governments, once parties have to choose within their program, once they have to give up certain things and stick to others to become clear what their actual priorities are, right? So it matters, especially in coalition governments, it matters what priorities are in politics. Now, this is a very hard question to solve, exactly because of the postmodern culture we're in. Because in postmodern culture, politics is personal and it's relative. So it's about whatever you want it to be, right? If it's important to you, then it's important. That is the attitude of today. And that is cool, right? It's very nice that we have this freedom to pursue the things that we value and it's very fundamental that you can care about things that you care about, and that, if you're black, that you can care about people, about issues of your own people. And if someone else says that is not really important, then you can say, no, this is important to me. So I'm gonna go with this type of politics, even if I know climate change is technically more important, but I am dealing with, black people, for Black Lives Matter today. So that is very important, that people respect that freedom. Nonetheless, I'm going to tell you the opposite, because I I will try to at least I will offer to you one way of thinking about how you could order priority in problems. Or at least that's what I try to do. I care about so many things, but I care about some things more than others. And I want you just to do the exercise of trying to order, let's say, priorities. Knowing that you can care about whatever you want. And that is a great achievement, but it doesn't mean you should think about it. Now, what I think is that in politics, we should give priority to escalating problems. What does that mean? This comes with a number of criteria, right? An escalating problem is a specific type of problem. Ask yourselves a bunch of questions, I would say. And again, these are not the only things you should care about. And again, I shouldn't even use the word should. I offer you to think about this. First of all, is the problem you care about getting bigger? If it is, then that should rank it up in the list of priority, right? Not should, could rank it up in the list of priority. And if it does get bigger, does it affect more people? You think that's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. For example, if homophobia would increase, that would not affect more people because the gay population is constant, right? But if the pandemic increases, that does affect more people. Or if inequality increases, that does affect more people. So if the problem grows, does it literally become a problem of more people? That again would escalate the problem. Also, you need to ask yourself, do I have anything that I can point at that should tell me this will get better? Right? Is there any, not some hope, but some empirical evidence that things will get better? The example I like to use here is overpopulation. Overpopulation is a growing problem. It's a problem that will affect more people, but there's very good demographic evidence that overpopulation will improve. And actually, we've already turned the corner. We're already on the way down. We don't see that yet because of increasing life expectancy, but this has happened. We already have declining birth rates across Earth, not just in the West. So overpopulation is a very serious problem, but it's not a problem that is, that is not improving. It's a problem we actually already solved. We just don't know that yet, or we don't see that yet. But as long as my generation doesn't have more than 2 kids on average, which they don't, then things have already worked out. Let's say it like that. And the last question I ask with problems is, do I have an understanding of how the peak looks like? As in, do I have an idea of how bad this can get? Because some problems you already know what the most extreme form looks like. But with other problems, you can't even imagine how bad this problem would get. Like, we don't really know where this is going. Now, I want to give you some examples of this. Now, first of all, before I do that, right, problems I care most about are poverty. Why do I care most about poverty? Because I think it is the most deadly problem. And I can prove that. This is not speculation. I showed you this chart before, but I like it so much I want to remind you of it. Poverty kills more people than violence. Poverty kills more people. Poverty, since the capitalist era, after communism died, killed more people than all violence in the previous century combined. All colonial repression, all world wars, all revolutions, all political purges, all of that killed less people than poverty did. So to me, this is a problem that does affect more people as time goes on. But we're not here to talk about poverty, right? I just want to give you some examples of escalating problems in this very professionally drawn chart of mine, and with my elite Photoshop skills, as you can see. I don't even have Photoshop. So what this represents is time, right? We move from left to right, and time happens, and the red line in the middle is today. So we have a few problems here. We have a few escalating problems. The first one is climate change. As you can see, the lines get bigger, right? They go further apart. Climate change started at some point in the industrial era, and then it just forever kept growing bigger. Now, the scary thing about climate change is that we don't know where it ends. We don't really understand how these end times are going to look like, which makes me very nervous and should make you quite nervous too. Another escalating problem, much less concerning, is neo-fascism. Unless you're a neo-fascist, then this is great. But if you're not, you see that since a few years ago, since 2010, let's say, we have this comeback of neo-fascism, right, including gaining US presidents, etc. Now, the good news is that we have seen the end of this movie, right? We know what real fascists are like, and we know where this kind of goes. Not in a pretty place necessarily, but at least we can imagine it. So that's an escalating problem that actually was bigger in the past. Then we have inequality. Now, inequality, because of spatial issues, I didn't draw this right, but of course it goes exponential. It should be a lot broader, my lines. Inequality is a problem that's not new. We had hyper unequal times in the past, right? In feudalist times, for example, the king would have everything and 95% of people would own nothing at all. Or you had times where you had slavery. So we have an idea of what extreme inequality is, but we're approaching that again very, very fast, right? Every year. So that's an escalating problem. Robots are an escalating problem. Robots were not a problem in the past, but since about 10 years ago, or since the 90s maybe, this has taken off, and this is growing so much faster than you know. Whatever you think robots can do, they can already do more, because that was based on your idea of yesterday. And they, since you got up this morning, they already, some kind of nerd in a lab made them better. And that's very concerning, because with robots, we don't know where it ends. This could, this more than any problem, could change the human condition. We could simply break social fabric with robots unrepairably. Like we don't even know how to live anymore. That is possible, but we don't know. We don't know. Maybe it all turns out well, right? Or maybe we'll get fat like in WALL-E, and it's comfortably decadent. We don't know where this will end. I'm hyper pessimistic on this one in particular, but we will see. But these are escalating problems. I hope you understand my logic here, that all problems can be important to you and should be important to you. But I would always, if you think about your general orientation, take at least one escalating problem into account, right? I also care about things that are not really important. They're just important to me. But the majority of the things I care about are problems that to me have priority, because they will get out of hand if we don't solve them fast. And like inequality, like climate change, etc. But again, that's just my point of view on it. Let's move on. Are you still with me, or are you terribly bored, Miss Mariana?
Here.
We are
What?
here, teacher.
And are you terribly bored?
No, teacher. We're fine.
Okay, good. I want you to reject theological solutions. What the hell does that mean? Theological solutions is actually one of my own concepts. I don't think you will be able to Google it. And if you do, I have to sue these people because I wrote an essay about it, I think in like 2006 or something. So, or 2009, when I was in my last year of bachelor's. Why do I call it theological? What's theology? Theology is technically the study of divine beings. Theology is the study of the Bible, of the Quran, of angels, of devils, of gods, right? Theology is the study of basically external forces that have some spiritual link to us. Now, theology is great. What is not so great are theological solutions. Theological solutions, what I mean by that, is that in politics, you are going to base your problem solving on faith. You're going to base your problem solving on faith in some kind of higher force, something external that's going to solve the problems, right? It's a theological solution because some divine being or principle is going to intervene. It's not going to be you. It's not going to be humanity that's going to solve the problem. Now, this is easy to understand in the example, the literal example of religion, right? If you would say that climate change should not concern us because in Romans 16, paragraph 13, it says, God will save, and that means that God will save us from climate change and things are going to be all right. That's a bit of a weird proposition, right? By the way, this literally happened. I was a reviewer of some political magazine and somebody wrote an article about climate change, arguing that because of Romans 16 in the Bible, God saying that he will save, we shouldn't worry about climate change. This happened. So I rejected it. So this is pure theological reasoning, right? It says something in the Bible is going to be okay, so you're like, nah, there's no more problems. That's extreme, right? But there's a lot of variance of this, right? Whenever a politician says we should pray, I get like kind of uncomfortable, like, no, you should do something, motherfucker. We shouldn't pray. You should do something. So you understand, I think, where I'm going with the theological problem, right? In a religious sense, this is not about church and state. I'm not against religion. I get along great with religious people, particularly priests, like the last consistent people on earth sometimes, in my view. But it's not about state and church. I don't even care about that. It's about church and action. It's about separating what you do or what you won't do from religion, especially what you won't do, right? That you won't act upon problems because God will take care of that, because Allah will make it all right, or because of, this is some divine punishment for being gay or whatever it is. Like this type of reasoning, this to me is very dangerous. I don't believe we can trust on any higher force. At least we cannot trust these escalating problems, these things that we have only a limited amount of shots of solving. We cannot trust that something that I cannot see or that I cannot really understand or that you don't really understand. You shouldn't trust in any of those solutions. If you don't understand it, it's probably bad. It's one of the first rules of most communist leaders. Don't do things that people don't understand. So I believe we shouldn't trust in these things. And this is not arguments against religion at all. Faith is very good. It's just better to have a plan. I'm a bit traumatized in this regard when we did interviews with migrants, with illegal migrants here in Monterrey that travel to the US. They're very religious people. And they're religious to the irrational level. Like you would ask them, where are you going to go next? That's what we asked at the end of the interview. These are long interviews. At the end, you ask, so what's next? And some of them would be like, I don't have a plan. I'm just going to go wherever God tells me to go. These are the people that will die. And they do. These are the people that they have no plan, no preparation. Just like, God says I have to go north. Okay, I'm going to go north. And then you just run out of water in the desert and you're dead. This happens all the time. It happens because of fate. Or people who are not scared of narcos because God is with them. Stuff like that. and then they end up with a bullet in their head in a ditch. So too many people end like that. So I'm okay with fate, but I also want us to have a plan. Now, this rant is not actually about religion. I use religion as my introduction so you understand the logic of what I'm saying. But it's not really about religion. Because theological reasoning is not limited at all to religion. As a good psychoanalyst, you should know that religion is very far from dead. Organized religion is dying. But metaphysical beliefs of people is well and alive. I ask my students every semester in my bigger class, who believes in God? And I know like half of people would raise their hand. And I ask them, who believes in ghosts? And then like 90% would raise their hand. So even if people are so-called atheists, they still believe in a lot of metaphysical stuff. And it also sneaks into our politics. There's a lot of not religious, but theological reasoning in politics. And you see this in a number of ideologies. One of them that's very clear in is neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is very religious, very theological in how it thinks. Deeply, I think that's the secret of neoliberalism. There's some deep religious element to it, or not religious, theological element to it, in that it trusts in some external force, in something that I cannot see. I could comprehend it a little bit, but only in theory, right? It trusts in something they literally call the invisible hand. Think about that. The invisible hand. That's what we have to have our faith in. We have to have faith in some kind of mechanism, some kind of golden principle that is going to make things all right. Right? Markets balance things. That's the mantra. So things will reach some equilibrium in the future. And whatever it is, whatever problem you have, climate change, COVID, etc., the market will solve it. This to me is not very different from believing that God will intervene. Especially if it doesn't actually happen, right? Like in the case of neoliberalism in Latin America, despite this actually never happening, as you proved in your state studies, people still keep coming back to this idea. Although they have, I think, 0 examples of this working out in Latin America, it's still some kind of eternal return to God, to faith. Just like how people keep believing in God, the worse their life gets. They'll believe even more. I think neoliberalism is very, very religious in its undertone. Even if and it has the same effect, that we're not trying to solve problems. We're trying to stay out of it. Things will work their way out. Can you see this parallel? Or do I sound like just a crazy old man?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay.
Doctor, but like it also depends because it has principles, no? Like I think people could like say that it works like that because of the principles, but at the same time, religion also have principles, and but they are like intangible. Like many things have principles that you can't actually like touch them or something. Like they're just
Yes,
there.
value, sure. But I'm talking specifically in relation to problem solving, where neoliberalism in general will not try to solve the problem because it assumes that as long as you are in a competitive environment, things will work themselves out. That's not the only reason why people are neoliberal. They're neoliberal because they like liberty or because they like, I don't know, whatever whatever value associate with this. Yes, it's also based on principles. But there is an element of kind of outside force in this, which is a little bit, I don't know if I replied to you accurately, but it's a little bit linked to also the next thing, to technology. The way that technology has partly taken the place of religion in our society, in the sense that it's a thing we believe in for the future, right? A lot of the problems we have today, we think we're going to solve them by technology. Technology is in that sense a new fate. And it's also similar to fate in the sense that we don't actually have the technology. We just believe it's going to exist, right? We have kind of trust that it's going to be there, available and implemented. And that is a big element of fate to it. To give you a number of examples, right? With robots, I study this. There's all kind of lists of things robots will replace, like list of professions and the rate of replacement, etc. When I come with this stuff, right, I can name you hundreds of professions that will disappear. People are always like, yeah, but robots are going to create new jobs. Then I ask them a simple question, which jobs? And then usually they cannot answer. They're like, jobs, good jobs, but what jobs? You know, drones. Drones are not people. People who build drones. Drones are built by other robots. People who maintain the robots that build the drones. Like, you know, it becomes, I never get a satisfying answer to this question. People are like, yeah, but it creates more jobs. Can you give me 2 examples? No. So this is raw faith. And you see this with journalists. You see this when they interview CEOs who are going to cut back. They're like, yeah, but it will create more jobs, right? And the CEO is like, not any that we have planned. And they write many new possible jobs. It's like the headline of the article or something. Even the CEO says no. So you have this faith that things are going to be okay. You just cannot explain me how. In a similar sense, we have this with climate change, where we also have this faith in technology, whether it's true or not. And this goes with neoliberalism. I clearly remember this. This was 2011, I think, when Mark Rutte is the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, neoliberal. He went to the UN and he made this passionate speech that we should trust in the market to solve climate change, right? That private industry is going to lead the way forward. And the day after that, this massive scandal of Volkswagen broke that showed that Volkswagen was polluting 10 times more than they officially registered. And basically the whole car industry went ecologically bankrupt that day. So there's this kind of fate that the market will solve it, but you can't explain how. This is similar to it. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it is intangible, which is very different if you compare to socialism or conservatism, for example, which usually quite explicitly can explain you what they're going to do and what the effect of that is going to be, right? But I'm not just criticizing the right, although I really am. Just to prove you, I can do the other. I'm also going to criticize the ecologists here. Not all ecologists, but a certain type of ecologist, the hippie ecologist. Because the hippie ecologist also has theological reasoning in the sense that they believe in mother nature. They believe in this kind of maternal, fetishized idea that nature is good and that nature is healing, right? Nature is life. That if we just leave things to nature, if we leave things alone, if we go live in nature, that nature will somehow correct everything, right? Except this is fetishism. You're projecting things that are not there. You're personifying nature. Nature is a system of things trying to kill each other. That's what nature really is, right? If you lay long enough on the floor, ants will come and eat you. Like nature is not our friend. If nature could, it would kill us. So we should fear nature, not be like nature, you want to solve us. This is also very similar to theological reasoning. We should stay away from nature as far as we could. The idea is not to solve climate change that we go live in the woods. That will make it worse, right? Because now have to pump water to the woods. That will cost energy and this and that. We should live in a tower or something. Stay away from nature. This is not my idea. It's from Zizek, by the way. This idea that Mother Nature is a similar type of logic, where we attribute almost theological qualities to a very violent and brutal system that we call nature. So we should fear it, not deify it. We should try to not piss it off. That should be our dealing with nature. In any case, I hope you understand where I'm going with this, right? I am of the belief that this type of discussions are actually very fundamental. They, on a very fundamental level, make a distinction between left and right in the political spectrum. One conceptualization of left and right, concept we've been talking about a lot, is that of Eric Roll, World Book on Economic History. Do I have it here somewhere? No, my assistant has it. And he says something very interesting. I think he says in a footnote even. For him, the difference between left and right is in the concept of justice. He believes that the right of the political spectrum sees the world as fundamentally balanced, as that nature is balanced, that things are in their essence okay, or at least as they should be, but this gets disturbed. There are certain people and events that disturb this natural balance of things and must be restored. You can see this with neoliberalism, right? The market is naturally balanced, there's just disturbances. And you see it with conservatism, you see it with nationalism. They all have this understanding of justice, right? Things are how they were supposed to be, and then some crazy leader came, some populist came, and he took the power from the well-prepared people, and now things are messed up, and we should restore it to how it was, right? To the proper people are back in charge. The people that should be in charge are back in charge. It's a right-wing way of thinking. A left-wing way of thinking, the left fundamentally sees the world as a catastrophe, as a succession of injustices, right? He went from slavery to colonialism to capitalism, like things, it just keeps piling up. And what justice means is balancing, not restoring the balance, but actively intervening. It's justice as in Lady Justice, the woman with the scale and the sword. One hand weighs what should be done, the other one stabs fools that are causing injustice. That's justice. You judge the world and you correct it. You actively intervene. Things are wrong and we must make them different. That's ecology, feminism, socialism, communism. They all share this way of thinking, right? And that's, I think, quite interesting view on that. Now, as we just discussed, I don't trust in auto-balancing systems. So this is one of the main reasons I would consider myself on the left, actually. I think that only conscious intervention will save us. I think that only actively gathering information, judging situation based on that, and acting upon that is what's going to save the world. I think we live in kind of ultimate test times. Look, it's quite simple. Either we have the mental capacity to deal with these problems, or we don't. And if we don't, that's fair. It just means we were not worthy of being, I don't know, a galactic force. We were just too stupid as humanity. But if we are, that's what we should do, right? We shouldn't trust in no robot or no God or none of that stuff. We have to do it. If we can't do it on our own force, it's not going to happen anyway. So either we're going to do this through our human capacity of consciousness, or it's doomed anyway. So we should focus on this conscious intervention in calculating, judging, acting, rather than trusting. And if that is true, and I hope you really agree with me here, that means we need democracy, right? That means that things must come from the people, that things must come from what people agree with what people consciously decide, because those are the things that we're actually going to do. And thus, I strongly favor politics that are about consciously judging things rather than trusting in any type of external force, including this one part of Marxism I don't like, which is about predicting the future and, the revolution will come on its own, and this type of logic where there's some kind of like ghost in history that's going to make things all right. I don't think I like the communists who actually made things happen, like Lenin and Castro. They were like, nah, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to kill this fool and, try to take power that way. I think that's a lot more realistic than just waiting for the revolution. There's a lot of communists who like every day turn on the news. Revolution hasn't happened yet. Maybe tomorrow, right? That's not the type I like particularly much. And that's that. Do we have time? Yes. Okay. We have time. Oh, do you have questions, Miss Sophia? Are you still entertained?
Yeah, I'm still entertained.
Okay, good. Fifth claim is that there is no center. This is shocking to you because we've been talking about the center. Now, one thing I don't like about politics or political culture is this idea that the truth is in the middle. This idea of a golden middle, right? This is what niños and niñas bien associate with wisdom. The idea that you're taught by parents that, that all radical ideas are bad. That what's best is probably somewhere in the middle. I have a bunch of problems with this. Some of them are philosophical. Is that there's simply no philosophical ground for this to be true. The middle option is not logically better than others. Okay, this doesn't work virtually, but if we were in a real classroom and some terrorist would come in, right, and he says, I'm going to kill all your students. The correct answer is not, oh, no, you should only kill half of them, right? Either I should let it happen or I should try to kill this man myself. But some kind of halfway solution usually is not the right answer to this, right? Similar to climate change, what if we only let it raise by 10 degrees instead of 20? That's not necessarily the right thing to do, right? Just if you have a number of options laid out on a table, the middle one is not logically the best option. As I just tried to explain you, I had more examples, I kind of forgot them. Damn it. Anyway, I hope you understand that middle option there's no logical force that would force you to do something. And another reason why people would prefer the middle is because they assume that people who have kind of average opinions are more nuanced or understand more complexity, right? If one argument against extremes would be that it's not that simple. But that's again not logically true. Climate change is a very complex issue to which most experts, most scientists who study climate change would strongly prefer radical solutions. It was up to them, actual climate scientists, we would be in some kind of hyper environmental politics. So again, the middle ground there is not necessarily what the people who best understand the problem would pick, right? There's no relationship between complexity or nuance and the middle of any type of solution. So this idea that the middle ground is the golden center, I would dare to question that. There's nothing wrong with being radical. Being radical is just a form of consistency, basically. It means that you take your own values serious and you take your analysis to the end. That's what being radical means. You say, okay, if exploitation is real, then we should stop it, right? If climate change is real, we should stop it. We should not know it's real and then ignore it. If you're radical, you're consistent with what you believe. You take the consequences of the logical truth of what you're saying beyond where you would be comfortable, right? If you, for example, if you're really concerned about the environment, you should not eat meat. That's just what it is. Or you should not eat beef. If you do, then okay, then you're just less consistent with it. Doesn't mean you're right? It's not that it's too extreme not to eat beef. Doesn't mean that it's not scientifically true that you shouldn't do that. So there's nothing wrong with being radical. There's something wrong with being fundamentalist. Fundamentalist means that you're radical without any basis. It believes that you believe in some absolute truth without reflecting on it, right? You're radical, but you don't want to hear any arguments against it. Or you're radical, but you already decided that that's how it's going to be. And no matter what I say or do, I cannot change your mind. That is bad. That's dangerous, right? But that's fundamentalism, not radicalism. Fundamentalism can lead to all kinds of atrocities because you don't take feedback. You don't notice that, I know, your plan causes people to starve and then you should stop, right? Even if you're radical, you should stop. Only a fundamentalist will keep going then. That is dangerous. But being radical or not having a centrist opinion, there's nothing logically wrong with it. Plus, the center doesn't really exist. There's nothing. The center is an extremely relative place, right? The center depends on the edges. Wherever the center is depends on the edge of your political spectrum. And thus, that center is relative to a particular time and space. In Mexico, for example, our political spectrum goes from center left to, let's say, deep right, but not extreme right. Right? It ends in either far conservatism or nationalism, but not fascism. And it starts with social democracy on the other end. Okay, you have a Communist Party with like 4 people at UNAM who are with that, but you have, mainstream party politics is from center left to far right. That means that the center is center right, right? The PRI is our centrist party, but the PRI is not a centrist party in intellectual spectrum, right? Or international comparison. The PRI is a right-wing party. They're just in the middle because they're in between Morena and PAN. And they're kind of the same party. So this is very misleading what the center exactly is. And if you then say, oh, but my position must be the right one because in the center, but you're not, you're neoliberal, that's problematic, philosophically speaking. So this center doesn't really exist as a position. It's a consequence of other positions. And therefore, there is no logical power or no moral power to the center. Because it is inherently nothing. It's just a position based on other positions. Plus, there is also no such thing as being neutral on things. Being neutral is lying. If you say you're neutral on something, it means you don't want to say it. It's that simple. And if you don't want to say it, you probably vote for the PAN. This is also based on encuestas. But anyway, in any issue, either for or against it. It's that simple. There's no neutral position. There are things that I am centrist in. Very few things, but there are few things. Well, what that really means is that I'm too scared to really take sides. Or that I'm for a very specific thing that is neither the two options I'm offered, right? And that would be a centrist position, although it's not a centrist position, but that's what you would call it, right? It's not the middle of those two positions, it's something in between. But it's still a choice. It's still not a neutral choice, right? There's a handful of issues that I would consider myself centrist in, but most not. But there is no such thing as neutral. You're either for or against something at the end of the day, if you're honest with yourself. And so this center is a kind of a fake position, intellectually speaking. I'm not saying it's a wrong position. There's nothing that says that it's wrong either. It has this aura of moderation that is fake. The center is not more moderate or safe. There's nothing about the center that is not extreme. Peña Nieto was the center, right? Migrants suffered a lot. A lot of people, had 36,000 disappearances. There's nothing that tells you that the center is necessarily less violent or anything less extreme than the outsides of the spectrum. This is what a Marxist called Tariq Ali writes in his book, Extreme Center. He writes about this, he writes, for example, about the migrant crisis, how it's all centrist governments that went to war in the Middle East and all centrist governments that ignore these migrants at the sea. So if your government was radically left or radically right or center, you die all the same. It's not necessarily less violent. It's not necessarily less anti-democratic. This idea that only the outside of the political spectrum could lead to dictatorship, for example, is false. You have various dictators that it is kind of hard where to exactly place them. People like Gaddafi, for example, or Mubarak. Some call them on the left, some call them on the right. They're kind of centrists, right? And nonetheless, they're dictators. So there's nothing safe about the center of the political spectrum. It's a false equation we make between those things. And that is my point here. Mr. Diego.
Putin could be considered a centrist?
That depends on the time. I think Putin is shifting slowly towards fascism over time. He definitely has a lot of characteristics of it. You know, you have the hyper-nationalism, you have the one leader, you have the corporatism, you have the external and internal enemies logic, you have control of media, you have elimination of his enemies, violence. I think Putin was a centrist that's kind of slipping towards fascism over time. So that would be my answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I'm not arguing against the center, though it sounds like I am. I'm just saying it should not intimidate you if people call your position extreme or something like that, because the center can be as extreme. These are just words, right? This doesn't mean too much about what will end up happening. And that's where I'm going to stop today, because if I start with the next one, I won't be able to finish that thought. So what are your questions and comments? Ms. Mariana.
Okay, from this thing that the center, it's in ideology, right? Because in like reality, if you came from a country with like 70 years of right wing ideology, and then you have a left government, you cannot do everything like radical. One like with some years, no.
I'm not making the case for extreme policies. I think the center can be a very wise path to walk, but I'm just saying that it is not logically superior to the others. It just depends on your situation. I think politics are all situational. I think different plans work in different contexts at different times. And as you say, in our country, the extremes are hard to do for geopolitical reasons. So yes, I would agree there. But that doesn't mean that how you say this, that in theory, that's the best path to walk. It's just a path that you can walk right now. But you might want to end up somewhere else later. If that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. I should formulate my words better. I agree with you.
Yes.
That's my message.
Okay.
Any comments, reflections, teacher? This is nonsense. Why you wake us up in the morning for this? Come on now. Miss Sophia.
I will add somewhere. I think that in the theological solutions, that we also need like this capacity to accept that we don't know things. I think that at least in politicians, that's a big problem. Like people, like you don't have to be a todólogo, you don't have to know everything, but you are responsible to like learning and analyze what is going on, and also like accepting like we are making mistakes. Like I think that people kind of go to say that, oh, God is going to save us, or the invisible hand, because they can accept that they are making mistakes, or that they don't actually know how to reach the problem. I will add something like that.
As in when people say that everything happens for a reason, to cover up that they just did something stupid.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
because at the end of the
recognize that.
day, it's like a problem. Like okay, God is going to come, but when? Like when? Like maybe if God exists, maybe He will come in 50 years, but in those 50 years, people already die, and I don't know.
Well, my understanding of it is that God saves after you die. God saves your soul, not your flesh. That would be my theological answer to this. So it's just a misinterpretation of people who think God's going to help them when their car breaks down. That never was promised. Jesus did things, but Jesus was God. Like you had to meet him. Like he just had to be there, and then he would help you if you would run into him. But
Hmm.
like it's not randomly going to help you if you're alone in the desert. So God saves your soul after you die, saves it from damnation. I think that's what God does for us. I'm not religious, but I'm being the priest here. I think that's like the consistent understanding of God saving you. I think there's a lot of evidence of people getting shot in the head while praying. So that type of saving, just as a sociologist who deals with vulnerable people, this is very dangerous. This type of thinking that
Yes.
they will come because they won't. You should call the police, not pray. If if something's happening. So no, but this happens a lot. Um, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the religion. It's more people's use of the religion and using it for things that the book doesn't really say is gonna happen, but you still believe it's gonna happen. That's more my reading of it.
Yeah, because like I don't know, maybe my problem with God is that like I feel like it's a way to control people. Like, okay, just keep exploiting yourself, and maybe later, Jesus will save your soul. But like, why am I like? Why should I live without dignity and without, human basic conditions, safety, food? Like, I don't know, kind of contradictory for me
And I
to
think that's
talk
what this.
about poverty when the Bible it's about cooperation and all that pretty stuff in a
Yeah.
way. Mm.
Yes. It's religion is a battlefield, like any other institution in society. It's a form of political struggle that the left has ignored. This is one of the big weaknesses of the left. Left is just like, religion is irrelevant. It's ever since Lenin, they were like, religion is irrelevant, and it wasn't. Um, so, because even if you kill the church, it doesn't mean you end religion. Because people start believing in karma or other things. People keep believing in stuff. Even if they're atheists, deep down, they still have some kind of ghosts or whatever it is that they believe in. So that is, I think, the left. If we talk about the left now, should craft its own spirituality almost, and that's what I'm gonna do in 10 years. I will, Mr. Diego. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, regarding the same thing of the theological stuff, I also once saw a communist TikTok that talk about the how Marx saw religion as a form of alienation
Mm-hmm.
because, well, yeah, it deprives us from the possibility or potential to be revolutionary, or even this thing, it was very interesting to me, like how thinking that you are gonna have a better life in the sky when you die also deprives you from searching to have a more dignifying life here in the earth.
Yes, that is true. At the same time, there's something very classist in making fun of this. Atheism is often a classism in disguise, I find, with modern atheism at least. There's something disgusting to it in the sense that atheism is all very fun, especially nihilism is very fun if you're rich, because you won anyway, right? You don't need some kind of cosmic big brother. But if you have to work 16 hours a day, there's something to fate that helps you, and that's valuable. So this is very double-edged. The critique is true, but like I don't know what you're supposed to do with this if you're a poor religious worker. Like, all right, so life sucks and there's no hope at all. you know, I don't really know what to think about. I think what Marx and Camus got it wrong is that you should then try to provide an alternative, a spiritual alternative that is mobilizing, that is emancipating, that does get people into action, but that has the same element. But anyway, that's for another time. And again, in 10 years, I'll write a book, Radical Humanism. Get it. Pre-order. Right. Good. I have to go to my next class. I'm not joking. I have the plan already. I need to become older and wiser in order to write it. And more famous, most importantly. Good. See you next time for more of this stuff. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir. Have a nice day. See
You
you.
too.